has the diameter of a barrel. This one's across the barrel. 16 inches. In metric terms, 406 millimeters. Okay? Fired a 16-inch shell about 20 miles. So that's the main battery of the ship. Then we have the secondary battery, these 5-inch guns. So they're about this big around, 127 millimeter. There are 5 turrets on each side, so 10 turrets, 2 guns per turret, total of 20 5-inch guns. Right? Then there's the anti-aircraft guns. All these what look like little donuts scattered around the ship. Each of those is a quad mount 40 millimeter anti-aircraft gun, rapid fire. We'll talk more about them when we see them in person. That's the big anti-aircraft guns. And then the smaller ones, basically anywhere there's room around the ship, they have the 20 millimeter cannon for close-in defense. And last but not least, you carry 2 airplanes. These are for search and spotting enemy targets. Okay, these are float planes, seaplanes. They're launched off by these catapults. They do their mission. They land in the water next to the ship, and then the crane hoists them back. That's how they recover. Okay? Now, I want you to take a look at the catapult that the airplanes are sitting on, because when we go up on the ship, we don't have it anymore. They're gone. It's one of the few major pieces of equipment that is not here. Otherwise, the ship looks the way she looked when she was decommissioned in 1947. She's been sitting right there for 60 years. We just had our 60th anniversary. She's 80 years old. She's a pretty good-looking lady for 80. 4 screws. 4 main engine rooms, 2 rudders. Any questions? General overview about the ship.
Forward, aft, how does all the main things work?
Aft, the pointy end is forward, the blunt end is the stern or aft. Okay, so forward, aft. The port side is the left side when you're facing forward. It's also the right side when you're facing aft. In other words, the port side is always the port side, no matter which way you're facing. The starboard side is the port and starboard. Okay, it's important Navy terms. We're going to Navy on. Any other questions? All right, let's get your photos and get on the ship. First group. Around the ship, we built 15 million that copper dams. That's so we can pump out the water and get it to steel and prepare the steel. We've already done the bow with something. And we're going to go straight to the airplane so we can meet the Marines. Before they have their retirement. Yeah, good. A little out of order because we want to finish before the Marines get started here. But I told you about the airplane. Remember I said that the catapult, remember on the model there was a catapult sitting on here. That thing would rotate out. The airplane is sitting on the catapult. The ship's going as fast as it can go, get as much wind over the wings as possible. The pilot's got the throttle all the way up. And then last but not least, they would use a 5-inch shell cartridge. About this big around, about that long, to literally blast the airplane into the sky. Okay? The airplane will fly at about 65 knots. Now that was a problem during the hurricane that we had here. What was the famous hurricane? I can't remember.
Hurricane Matthew?
No, the one after Matthew that was so bad. Anyway, during the hurricane, the wind was blowing so hard, this thing almost got airborne. The guys actually out there with the ropes over the wings holding it down and really had this airplane in the Cape Fear River. Yeah. So the airplane would fly around to its mission. Its mission was to search for targets. It was also to be enough to see the fall of the shot from the guns and call back, say you're short, you're long, you're left, you're right. Okay? If they saw a submarine, they could drop a bomb on it. It's pretty easy to see a submarine from the air, especially if it's not too deep, right? Think about that. All right. But their main thing they did a lot of during the war was picking up downed pilots. Navy pilots get shot down. This thing could land in the water, pick them up, and bring them back. Okay? Once his mission was over, he'd fly back to the ship. The ship would kind of go into a skidding turn, take some flat water.
You said 12 this way?
The seaplane would land in the water next to the ship, and then his crane would hoist it back aboard.
How long did the whole operation take, roughly?
To recover, a train crew running right on top of their game for a week. The ship's very vulnerable when it's doing that.
Right, yeah.
So that's a bad thing. Now, let me tell you about this airplane. This particular airplane did not fly from North Carolina. It did fly in World War II. Over 7,000 of these were built. There's only 7 left in the world, and this is one of them. This particular airplane was on its way to Alaska from California, and they were over Canada, and they kind of got lost, and they ran out of gas, and they found this open spot on the side of a hill. They landed on the side of the hill. They weren't hurt, but the airplane was trashed. They hiked out. They met some friendly Canadians. Said, "Well, where's your airplane?" They said, "Well, we knew where the airplane was. We wouldn't have gotten lost and run out of gas. We don't know where the airplane is." So this airplane sat on that Canadian hillside for 25 years. Eventually, hikers found it, and then the company that built it, Watt Corporation, originally from Dallas, restored the airplane, painted it up real nice, and donated it back to us. So that's the provenance of this airplane. Any questions about that? All right, let's get out of the way of these birds.
So how did they keep the deck from the back of the
Notice the deck is teak, and you'll notice it looks pretty good. This is not the original deck. The original deck of the ship is in the gift shop. If you want to buy a piece, it's $50. Wow. Used to be $10, we're running out. Right? This teak was actually donated to us by the government of Burma, now called Myanmar. Teak grows basically in Brazil and Burma. A couple of years ago, the Burmese are trying to do an economic deal with the United States. They were trying to play nice. They said, "Hey, we'll throw in $500,000 worth of teak into the deal." So this is about $500,000 worth of teak, and it is a lot of work to maintain it. We get a lot of folks from Lejeune that come down to do PME, professional military education. They come down here, get a working party, and they'll help us scrub the deck. So we get that. You guys can brag, welcome anytime, participate in that. It's a lot of fun, actually. But we keep it clean. Teak, now why teak? Teak is an oily wood. It's used in marine applications because it's very resistant to salt water. It sheds off water pretty nicely. A couple other reasons. It's a great insulator. So it keeps it cooler underneath than a metal deck would be. It's also a sound insulator, so it deadens the noise a little bit. But it has another important quality, and that is it's part of the armor of the deck. You know, an enemy is going to shoot a shell, an armor-piercing shell at us, and the physics of that is that the shell penetrates the armor with a delayed fuse and explode inside. This wood deck has a little bit of give to it, just a little bit, and that's going to slow that shell down and maybe make it detonate up here instead of down below where all the guys are. Another thing, teak will splinter, but it makes little bitty splinters. If we were standing right there and a shell hit and we got showered in teak splinters, we'd all be hurt. And it'd be nasty, but it's not going to kill us. If this were oak makes splinters like this, look like lawnmower blades, and they kill people. So that's another reason why teak is a preferred application for this. And then the last thing, of course, is military tradition, right? Wooden decks, Iron Man wooden decks. That's really not why we have it. Any questions about any of that? Here, I just wanted to point out to you the walkway here. notice we have a walkway that goes all the way around the ship. It was paid for by the State Employee Credit Union. They gave us $3 million to build this thing, and the only stipulation was that it had to be free. So it is free. You can go out on it anytime you want, and there's little bump outs. Like this is the Coast Guard bump out. There's the Air Force. I think the next one is Marine, Navy, and Army. They're actually done by seniority of service, so I think the Army is the first one. Okay. And so it's a little bump out here. So like if you wanted to have like an Army retirement or something, you know, you could use that bump out. And we sort of decorate each one for that service. Okay? So be sure to do that before you leave. It's worth your time. There we go. Let's see. I don't want to interfere with this group. Go ahead. Now, you guys aren't with this group, are you?
I guess.
You're welcome to tag along.
Right.
But I'm not questioning that, but I just want to make sure you all work together.
Yeah, we're paid to be here, so.
No, I understand that. I get that.
I don't know. They didn't give us no directions. They just said, go on, you know. Okay.
So what we've got right here is the 20mm gun. They basically put them wherever they had any space. They are air cooled. So if you see films back in the day, you see airlines all across the deck to drive this gun. Crew of about 14 guys. Most of those guys were ammo passers. Because this thing fired a 20mm shell. You know what 20mm is? About this big, about that long. And 3.2 is important because these are firing, the enemy is knocking at the door, really close by. We could shoot these things and mess up those people over there on the other side of the river. We could hit them off the country, but not much further away than that.
That's pretty good distance.
Yeah, no more than about a mile. About a mile. Now, are you going to hit anything? The other problem with this was at the end of the war, the threat was kamikazes. You know, the Japanese airplanes coming in and basically suicide bombers, right? And you could shoot at a kamikaze and hit him, and maybe even kill the pilot, but these bullets didn't have a lot of stopping power, so the airplane keeps coming. So the pilot's dead, but that airplane keeps coming and crashes into you. And we suffered terrible losses towards the end of the war, particularly at Okinawa, to kamikazes. In fact, this ship was involved in a kamikaze accident that I'll talk about later. But one of the reasons I stopped right here, in addition to talking about this gun, is I want to tell you about George Conlon. Hopefully I don't interfere with him. George Conlon was a 19-year-old kid from Brooklyn, New York. Growing up as a teenager, he'd seen the battleship being built. And he said, when I grow up, I'm going to join the Navy and serve on that ship. So the moral of this story is be careful what you wish for. So George is a gunner. He's actually an aircraft engine mechanic, but his battle station is this gun. And George was a really popular kid. Everybody liked him. He was friendly, easygoing. And it was August 1924. We had invaded Guadalcanal on August 7th. The 1st Marine Division going ashore at Guadalcanal. And it took the Japanese about 2 weeks to respond with major fleet units. And they bring down 2 aircraft carriers, Shokaku and Zuikaku. These were aircraft carriers that had attacked us at Pearl Harbor. So these are big deals. These are experienced Japanese pilots. On the American side, we had Enterprise and we had Saratoga. Now, North Carolina was new to the theater, and she was assigned to be the shotgun, the guard, for the Enterprise. So this battle happens. It's an aircraft carrier battle, so the ships never see each other. They both launch their strikes. The strikes actually passed in mid-ocean. I wonder if they waved at each other as they went by, you know. Our guys went for the Japanese carriers, but the Japanese came at our carriers. And as soon as the Japanese attacked, North Carolina puts up this huge anti-aircraft defense. All her guns firing at these Japanese airplanes. And frankly, the Japanese had never seen anything like it. We had never seen anything like it. The admiral in command on board, or the captain rather, in command on board Enterprise, calls over on the radio and he says, North Carolina, are you on fire? Because there's just nothing but flames coming out of North Carolina. Of course, the North Carolina captain says, huh? I'm just shooting Japanese. We shot down 7 confirmed Japanese airplanes that day, 14 probables. So theoretically, as many as 21 airplanes shot down by North Carolina. Saved the Enterprise. She got hit by 2 bombs anyway, and it almost killed her. Most historians believe if North Carolina had not been there to save Enterprise, Enterprise would have been sunk and not gone on to be the most famous ship in U.S. Navy history, most decorated ship. This the Enterprise had 20 battle stars. This ship 15 battle stars. Okay, so that battle ensues, and now it's sort of toward the end of the battle, and here come 3 Japanese stragglers. They're late to the party. They're coming in late. They're trying to catch up. They look down and they see Enterprise is burning. Figure she's done for. But what else can we go after? Oh, look at that fat battleship. We'll go after the North Carolina. So the first Japanese airplane rolls in, like, from over here. We shoot it down. Second airplane rolls in, drops his bomb, but it misses. It hits the water alongside it. Third airplane, same thing, drops his bomb and it misses. But then he bends the airplane back around, and now he comes from stern to bow on the starboard side here, strafing the deck with his machine guns. The Japanese pilot does. Now right here is George Conlon. He's manning his gun. And all these guys are shooting at this Japanese airplane. And to be honest with you, some of them ran. Think about it. They'd never seen the enemy before. They'd certainly never seen him that up close and personal. And he's trying to kill him. And he's shooting at him. So some guys ran. George didn't run. George stayed at his gun, shooting at this Japanese guy. And the Japanese plane flew by so close, they said you could see his face. And it's over in a second. And as the airplane goes by, George looks down, and he's got a big red spot on his chest. And his last words were, "What just happened?" He'd been shot through and through in the chest. And the guys around him tried to, provide first aid. They tried to stuff bandages and stuff into the holes in his body, but it was too late. It was too grievous a wound, and George Conlon bled out on the deck and died right here, right where I'm standing. Now, he was the only man killed that day on North Carolina. And the reason I tell you this story is not to feel sorry for George, although we all feel sorry for George, but it changed the ship. At that moment, the boys of the Battleship Icona became the men of the Battleship Icona. Average age of the crew, 19 years old. Young guys. All guys back then. There were no women on ships back then. Of course, that's all different. Now we have female captains now. Female admirals. But all guys, and they loved George. George was one of the most popular sailors, and it really changed the crew. It hardened them. It changed their outlook. They knew this war was serious. They knew that we were going to win. We're going to sail into Tokyo Bay, and we're going to take the Japanese surrender. The only question is, how many more men like George have to die before we get there? Any questions about that? This way.
You walked in there.
These original folders. These are not the original. This is not the original. It is two. Very sturdy.
All right, so this is the gun of the aft 16-inch turret. It's turret number 3. There's 1, 2 up forward. This is number 3. And as you can see, this turret goes all the way down to the bottom of the ship. What you're looking at up here, the tip of the iceberg, if you will, we call that the gun house. 47 men inside this gun house. You can, in Army terms, you can kind of think of this as a big tank. 47 men inside, 3 guns, 16-inch guns. Here they are firing. Here you can see, get an idea of the size. Here's a guy cleaning out the barrels. This is during construction when they're lowering the turret on top. But this turret goes all the way down to the bottom. And down here we have our powder magazines with our powder bags. And then up here we have our shells. And so the powder and the shells are hoisted up to the gun house with mechanical hoists. And then loaded into the gun and fired from here. Now, I don't take you inside the turret because it's fairly crowded and it's like being inside a tank. But if you have some time later, you want to do that, feel free. The ladder in there is right over there. Okay? Any questions about the 16-inch gun?
How fast this thing is when it shoots out?
It comes out of the barrel 2,300 feet per second. fly 20 miles. Hold that thought because I'm going to actually go over to another place to talk more about the 16-inch gun.
Oh, yeah.
20 miles?
A second.
Could you imagine there's Chile 23 miles away right now? That's insane. I just got to give it to him. Yeah, that's a round. That's actually only part of the round. That's the part that flies out of the barrel.
Yeah, the other back of it goes well.
Well, there's 6 powder bags behind it. Okay, so one of the reasons I usually start my tours here. I took you back to the airplane to clear the Marines, but notice from this spot you can see all the important components of the ship. You got your 16-inch gun turret right here, turret number 3, the gun house. You can see it above. It fires this. Now it fires two kinds of projectile. One is an armor-piercing projectile. That's this one. It weighs 2,700 pounds. So what's that? It's a Toyota Prius. Okay? In the old days, we used to say it's a Volkswagen, but you guys know you can relate better to a Prius than a Volkswagen. 2,700 pounds. Of that 2,700 pounds, only 40 pounds is high explosive, because the killing power of this shell is it's made of super hard armored steel, and the idea is to pierce through, puncture enemy armor with a delay fuse. The fuse is here in the back, and it doesn't sound like much, but it's enough to get the job done. 60 millisecond fuse, blink of an eye, to hold off the detonation, so it penetrates inside, explodes inside, with massive damage inside. This is what you shoot at enemy battleships, or maybe if you're bombarding a shore target like an armored bunker, maybe. Okay, so that's the armor-piercing shell. There's another kind of shell that we don't show here, and actually it's the one that we mostly fired in the war, which is the high-capacity or high-explosive shell. It's a little bit lighter, it's the same size, a little bit lighter, 2,300 pounds, has 150 pounds of high explosive, but the shell casing's different. In this case, the shell casing is designed to fragment. And what you get, again, think of that lawnmower blade analogy. Think of thousands of lawnmower blades flying through the air, molten, supersonic. Does a number on people and anything that isn't armored. Okay? That's what you shoot in an amphibious assault when you're supporting the Marines going ashore, army troops going ashore. Because as you guys know, we can put in a lot of amphibious assaults. Those are just Marines. So, Marines and soldiers love these babies because that's artillery support right there. 6 We fired over 2,500 shells during amphibious assaults in World War II. In all the places you've heard of, Guadalcanal, Iwo Jima, Saipan, Tinian, Okinawa. We even bombarded mainland Japan. So that's the 16-inch gun. Now from here you can also see the 5-inch guns. Those are the ones with the white covers on the barrel. You can actually see 3 of the turrets. There's 2 more on this side, there's 5 more on the other side. You can see there's 2 rifles in each one of those turrets. Those shoot about 8 miles. They're 127. About 8 miles. They're really good ships. It's a short one. You have 1 round every 10 seconds. So you got 6 rounds a minute. Next to that, you see the 40mm boat rifle. This is a Swedish design that was built by license in the United States by General Electric. It's a quad mount, so there's 4 barrels. Each of those barrels is 40mm. It shoots a shell about this big around, about that long. Every 4th round is a tracer. So when you see the films and you see the fire going out, you're only seeing 1 out of every 4 shells. For every one you see, there's 3. What is this for? It's for building a wall of bullets in the sky that enemy airplanes have to fly through. It's a tremendous anti-aircraft weapon. 160 pounds, per minute per barrel. So that mount can put out about close to 600, 500 rounds per minute. Build that wall. You know, a lot of people think that you shoot down an airplane by, doing this. But it's actually really hard to hit an airplane. You have to lead it exactly the right amount. There's height differences. Better to create what's called barrage fire, where you, like I said, build a wall of bullets in the sky and the airplane has to fly through the water. Things out of a lot of airplanes. 15 mounts of these. You can see the 15, they're basically symmetrical on both sides, but there's the 15th one on top of the turret. They had a fire control director that, I don't know what color that is, light gray, it looks like an R2D2 or something. That was the gun director, and the officer or the senior enlisted guy who was manning that mount would keep the enemy airplanes in his sights, and those sights controlled the slewing of the guns. And then last but not least, some 20 millimeters, which we already talked about. So, how am I doing so far? A lot of numbers.
Looks like I can see it.
Well, you know what? There's some good stuff on YouTube, actually. If you Google 16-inch gunfire, U.S. battleship 16-inch gunfire, there's about 100 YouTube videos to choose from.
Yeah, I'm just talking about being on the deck.
Oh, and feeling it. Oh, yeah. When these 16-inch guns would fire, the whole ship would shake. I'll tell you a quick story. Obviously, if you're shooting this gun, you got to get rid of the airplanes, right? Because that gun's going to do damage to that airplane that's still there. Well, USS, not this ship, but USS South Dakota at Guadalcanal, she had a problem with her Kingfisher airplane. They couldn't launch it. It had engine problems. And they got into a night fight with the Japanese battleship. And they fired their aft turret, and it set the Kingfisher on fire.
Damn.
That's bad, right? That's okay. The second salvo blew the burning airplane over the side. Problem solved.
Modern problems, modern solutions.
There you go. All right, let's keep walking.
So the white one that you wanted to finish? That was 500.
Here's that director I was talking about for the 40 millimeter. So the guy steering would be looking through this eyepiece and keeping the enemy airplanes in this eyepiece, and that would control the mount. The handles you've seen in the movies where the guys spin the handles, that's actually the backup system.
Really?
Yeah, the primary system was electronic, hydroelectric, and it was connected to this sight.
So when that turns, those will turn.
Exactly.
Oh, that's kind of cool.
Cool.
Then you just have to do it on there, just pull the trigger.
Do any of you guys believe in the paranormal stuff?
If your sensor goes off, I'm out. I'm out.
Oh, I'm not running sensors now. I'm running them at night.
No.
We'll be on the overnight investigation.
If their sensor goes off, I'm out. I will bounce.
Oh, this ship is very haunted on the inside now.
Okay, please don't tell me that.
There's a bunch of videos already up.
Am I doing all right?
Yes, sir. For now.
So this
So he
thing,
sees a ghost.
I need to tell you about this thing because This is an anti-aircraft gun. It's called a 1.1 inch. This was the original equipment on the battleship. The original, when she was originally built, there were 4 of these mounts. Well, that's grossly inadequate. I told you by the end of the war we had 15 of the Bofors guns on here. This thing was horrible. Number one, standard equipment for this gun is a sledgehammer. So that when it jams, not if it jams, so that when it jams, you can break it free with the sledgehammer.
Nice.
Yeah. They're a piece of garbage. Number two, if they didn't jam, they very often would not fire. If they did fire, they would very rarely hit what they were aiming at. And if they did hit what they were aiming at, it wouldn't do any damage. So it was a real piece of garbage.
Yeah.
But so you might say, well, why do we have one here? We have one because when they took these off, one of them was kept sort of for the ship. And from a Navy history perspective, this is a really important piece of, this is an artifact. Okay? This is like a buried mummy that you dig up and eat.
Probably worth a lot of money too.
So historians come and look at these guns to talk about them, but they were not used in the war. Well, they were used in the beginning of the war, and they were horrible.
How would you aim this thing? You just
I don't know. To be honest, I don't know. I don't know.
probably something like that.
Just kind of eyeballed it.
Could you imagine you're just like having a wonderful day and no ear pro on, and then that thing just starts ringing, and you're just like, well, I'm deaf now. Like, I didn't need my ears.
They did sound a warning horn about 10 seconds before they fired the gun.
So you just.
I'll tell you a story about that when we get up here.
The ship moves, and this freaking beast of a girl shoots.
Not really.
The ship doesn't move?
Not really.
The ship doesn't shake?
It does move.
It shakes, right?
Oh, it shakes
so like when you shoot a
shakes like a wet dog.
Yeah, when you shoot a Carl Gustav, you only shoot it like 12 times before you get brain damage.
When's the last time the engines were started on here?
1947.
Also, it's not telling if it still runs.
So like,
It doesn't run.
you shoot a Carl Gustav too many times, your brain bounces around with the percussions. How many times, like if this was shooting, would you be close to it, or were you like down in the boat?
You want to take shelter because when bullets come out, when the shells come out, there's an expanding gas bubble, right? And we were standing for the thing about that. So yeah, you don't want to be able to. That's why they say.
So you have 10 seconds to just get in.
By the way, the plane can amazing. I apologize right now. We got a lot of construction going on. We took the mast off because this and that scaffolding was so we could get at it. We took it off with this big crane, and the mast is actually in that white cube. When it's finished, they will use that crane to put it back up, take down the scaffolding, and it will look pretty again. But that mast has been sitting up there for 60 years in the wind and the rain and the hurricanes, so it took quite a beat.
Do you know anything about the night tour tonight? The ghost tour?
I know nothing about it.
Okay.
Not involved in it.
I know we have full access to the ship, but
But it's not up there yet.
not up there. Okay.
Okay, so come over here, and I'm going to tell you what I think is a really cool story that happened to, it's all true, that happened to the ship. Do you remember I told you about the Battle of the Eastern Solomons in August 1942, where George Conlon was killed? About 3 weeks later, North Carolina is operating southeast of Guadalcanal, but this time she's escorting the aircraft carrier Hornet. And there's a new aircraft carrier that's come through the Panama Canal to join the fight in the Pacific called the Wasp. And the Hornet and the Wasp were operating in this area, in an area known as Torpedo Junction. Now, why do you think they called it Torpedo Junction?
Probably because they were torpedoes.
Because Japanese submarines like to hang out there and catch the Americans going to and from our bases in the southeast. Okay? So it was a dangerous area. And in fact, on the 15th of September, so about 3 weeks after George Conlon was killed, we're operating out there, and there is in fact a Japanese submarine tracking the force, I-19. Japanese submarine I-19. And I-19 had been trying for days to get in a position to take a shot at this big task force. But think about it, a submarine, when it's submerged, is on a battery. The faster he goes, the faster he depletes his battery, right? And when his battery's depleted, he's got to come up and surface and get air and recharge the batteries, right, with his diesels. So generally speaking, submarines will operate during the daytime on the battery, and at night they'll surface to run their diesels. They can hide in the darkness, right? Okay. Now, nuclear submarines today, they don't have to do that. That's back in the day. So when he's submerged, he's very slow, is the moral of that story. And it takes him a long time to approach a target. But on the 15th of September, and I'm sorry, my chart's been schmoozed by birds or something. But anyway, on the 15th of September, I-19 at 2:44 in the afternoon, 14:44, on the 15th of September, raises his periscope, and he sees the most beautiful thing a submariner can see. Nothing but targets. As far as the eye can see, nothing but targets. And the closest target is the Wasp. And he's so close to Wasp, he can't miss. So, in accordance with Japanese doctrine, he fires 6 torpedoes at the Wasp. Because it's a high-value target. You want to make sure you kill it. And I said he couldn't miss, but he did miss. The first torpedo missed the Wasp and kept on going. The second, third, and fourth torpedoes hit the Wasp. Fire, flooding, destruction, bad news. The crew of the Wasp performed heroically. They fought to save their ship for 12 hours. Finally, at 4 o'clock in the morning, they went to the captain and said, "It's hopeless. Recommend abandon ship." The crew was taken off, and sure enough, Wasp sunk at about 5 o'clock in the morning on the 16th. In fact, good old I-19 was able to raise his periscope and snap a photo of the Wasp going down. So he knew he'd got the Wasp. About 250 American sailors died in that. The 5th torpedo missed the Wasp, traveled downrange about 3 miles, and slammed into the destroyer O'Brien. Blew the bow of the O'Brien clean off.
What kind of torpedoes were the Japanese using?
Best torpedoes in the world.
Oh shit.
Blew the bow of the O'Brien off. The crew of the O'Brien also fought valiantly to save their ship, and they did save their ship. They managed to keep it afloat. They got her into safety, and then her damage was so great they couldn't repair her in theater. They had to send her back to the States for repairs. Well, on her way home, some bad weather came up, and without a bow, she's not seaworthy, and so they had to abandon her. No loss of life, but the O'Brien sunk exactly 30 days after being struck by that torpedo. The 6th torpedo missed everybody, didn't hit anything. Let's go back to that first torpedo. Missed the Wasp, travels about 2 miles downrange, and on board the Lansdowne, U.S. destroyer Lansdowne, lookouts go, torpedo in the water. It's too late to maneuver, it's going to hit them. All hands brace for shock. They brace for shock, torpedo passes underneath the Lansdowne. Missed them by that much. Okay.
Brown pants.
2 miles downrange, U.S. destroyer Mustin. Exactly same thing happens. They see the torpedo, too late to dodge, passes underneath, misses the Mustin. 2 miles further downrange is us, Battleship North Carolina. We had seen the Wasp get torpedoed. Ship's going to general quarters. It's starting to ring up, maximum speed, and we get hit by a torpedo right here, right where I'm standing, below the waterline on the port side. It blows this hole in the side of the ship, 18 by 32 foot hole in the side of the ship. The ship had a torpedo protection system that worked as advertised. The torpedo protection system was designed to defeat a 600-pound warhead. This torpedo had a 900-pound warhead, but the ship maintained its watertight integrity even though this section of the ship was flooded. 5 guys were killed, 4 guys down below, 1 man standing right where Jake and I are standing. His name was Albert Geary, Seaman First Class Albert Geary. The explosion blew him over the side. He was last seen flying through the air into the sea. Body never recovered. Wow, lost at sea. Alright? So, now North Carolina's got a problem. We're taking on water. We take on 2 million gallons of seawater, 2 million pounds of seawater in about 5 minutes. We got flooding. Damage control parties seal off the whole area using watertight hatches, not doors. Okay? The difference between a hatch and a door is watertight. watertight hatches. They seal off the area. There's 4 bodies in there, but they can't afford to go get them. That's gonna have to wait. The other problem is there's a report in the #1 magazine way down at the bottom of this turret of smoke. That's bad. Imagine if you have a fire in your magazine. You all know, if you know about Pearl Harbor, the Arizona blew up at Pearl Harbor, right? It didn't blow up because the Japanese bomb hit it and did a number on it. It blew up because the Japanese bomb set off the magazine, and the Arizona blew itself up. Okay? So very dangerous. The captain's procedure in this case is to flood the magazine. The procedure does not include getting the men out of the magazine. There's 50 guys in the magazine. Wow. The captain floods the magazine, 50 men will die. But it's still the right thing to do, because if he doesn't flood the magazine and the ship blows up, then 2,000 men die. Right? The Captain Ford...
They don't have enough time to evacuate it, though?
Captain Ford says, evacuate #1 magazine, then I'll flood it. So he gets the men out, he floods #1 magazine, and that was the right thing to do, because it was a bad report. There wasn't smoke in the magazine. There was condensation because it knocked the environmental control system offline, so it's fog. That's why in the Navy we always say, and I'm sure you say this in the Army too, the first report is always wrong. Always. That's why you always look into it a little more, right? So that was a really good thing. They also do great damage control. They intentionally flood some tanks on the starboard side so that the ship will be level, because with all that seawater, the ship had taken on a 5-degree list cooler. So we got her level. We're able to maintain speed even with this big hole. So North Carolina heads off to a place called Tonga, the island of Tonga, Tabu, which is the capital of Tonga. And it's also called the Friendly Islands. They were friendly to the United States at the time, and still are. And by then we had recovered our 4 bodies in the flooded hole here. And we had a funeral for them. This is a picture of that funeral at the Tonga Batu Cemetery on the island of Tonga, South Pacific. 5 caskets, one of them empty, for Albert Geary. That cemetery still exists today. If you go to Tonga, it's there. It's the USS North Carolina Cemetery, and they take very nice care of it.
How far away is that?
About a 30-hour flight.
Oh, okay.
Literally on the other side of the world.
Okay.
The families of those 5 sailors decided to leave their loved ones' bodies there because they were being treated so well by the Tongan people. Okay? We went on to Pearl Harbor. This picture was taken at Pearl Harbor, and they put a patch over it. We got all those 1.1 crappy guns replaced with the 40mm Walkway. We got Battleship 2.0. We sailed back out, and 6 weeks later, we're back in the field. Alright, so I told you what happened to the Wasp, the O'Brien, and the North Carolina. What about I-19? Japanese submarine. Well, everybody's trying to sink him, but they managed to escape. And I told you he managed to get a photo as he's running away of the Wasp going down. And we captured that photo later on.
Where's the Wasp?
They're not interested.
Perfect timing.
They might be interested in your perfume, but not yours.
Oh, God.
Alright, so he gets away, he goes back to port, and he's a hero. He has just conducted the most successful submarine attack in history. There's never been a submarine attack like this before or since. In one attack, he sinks the Wasp. The O'Brien heavily damages the North Carolina. Of course, the Japanese reported the North Carolina had sunk. 6 times the Japanese reported that they had sunk the North Carolina. They were wrong 6 times. So, the captain of I-19 is a guy named Kanishi. And Kanishi gets promoted, and he gets transferred off of I-19 and given a new submarine, and he takes about 1/3 of the crew with him. This is a very important point. So they get a new captain, they get about About a third of the crew is replaced. They go back out on patrol, and they're operating around Guadalcanal where they're sunk by the U.S. destroyer Rabbit. So we get our revenge on I-19 about a year later. But that's not the end of the story. What happens to Kanishi after this? Kanishi's, I told you, got a new submarine. He gets orders to sail from Japan to Germany, where he will meet with Nazi officials, scientists, and receive plans for the V-1 bomb, the V-2 bomb. These are the terror weapons that the Germans have developed, including preliminary designs for an atomic weapon that the Germans were working on. And if you think Hitler would not have dropped an atomic bomb if he'd given the chance, I think you're wrong. So anyway, he makes it all the way to Germany, around Africa. Meets with the officials, gets the stuff. He's on his way back around Africa again. Stops in Singapore to refuel, because the Japanese were occupying Singapore. And he makes a fatal mistake. He calls home. Hey, this is Kanishi. I'm on my way back, stopping for gas in Singapore. I got the stuff. Be home in 2 weeks. Well, what do you know about our capabilities? Come on, you Army people. We're listening. The U.S. government's listening to their phone calls, like they always do. So we lay a trap for Kanishi in the Bashi Channel between Philippines and Taiwan. We got 6 American submarines waiting for him. When he comes through, they get him. So they got him. So that submarine gets sunk with all those secrets. Pretty cool, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah? Is that the end of the story? No, there's more.
Oh my goodness.
So, when the history of World War II is written, the Navy hires a guy from Harvard. He's a Harvard history professor. His name's Samuel Eliot Morison. He's the #1 maritime historian in the world. He's also a reserve Navy captain, colonel, 06. And he's writing his official history of the U.S. Navy, 18 volumes. And on the page talking about this attack, he says, there is no way on God's green earth that I-19 fired the torpedo that hit North Carolina. It's physically impossible. Japanese torpedoes couldn't go that far. There must have been another Japanese submarine out there conducting a simultaneous attack. And that was the history until 1984. Now enter this guy, Ben Blee. Ben Blee had been an officer on board the North Carolina. He's a Wilmingtonian. He's having coffee one day with his Japanese-American friend who says, you know, I got friends in Japan who say they know a guy whose uncle's cousin's best friend's brother knows a guy who says he was on I-19 during the war. Well, how could that be? I told you we sunk I-19, but remember I told you they took a third of the crew off? Turns out, these 3 Japanese gentlemen were on I-19. Not only that, 2 of them are torpedo men. They fired the torpedoes. The torpedo that hit us. So we invite them to Wilmington. They get a tour of the battleship, just like you're getting. They got to see a little more. And they say, well, that's all fine and dandy, but Samuel Eliot Morison is wrong. We were the only Japanese submarine that got any hits that day. He's also wrong about our torpedoes. They will, in fact, go that far. We routinely shot at targets that far away. So this meeting literally changed history. And now we know what really happened. And we gave the Japanese a piece of the torpedo that hit us, mounted on a plaque, and it said, you know, we apologize for the damage we did to this torpedo when we ran into it.
You're kidding.
No. And that torpedo is in the Japanese Naval Academy.
We ran into it.
And right now, as you know, as a memento for them. And we have pieces of that torpedo as well. Any questions about this long but good story, I hope?
Nope.
Doing good?
Doing good?
All right, let's do our Titanic photo. Yes!
Yay! Jack! Hold on to me, Jack!
You're going to do a little acrobatic. Okay. Underneath the wood. This is steel deck.
And the wood they used back in the day?
Yeah. What about it?
That was the same wood they used back in the day?
Well, you said it's for sale. I'm serious.
No,
$50? All right. This is a great photo opportunity because you got the big guns.
Yeah, big guns.
You got the sun. You got the city of Wilmington in the background. I'm happy to take photos
Yes, sir.
of your group or any individuals or whatever you want.
I'll take an individual photo.
Yeah, me too.
I'll take a group photo.